continue doing what we want to do now. Okay. So if you look at the traditional ways in which you can pretty much connect to your AWS infrastructure, for example, you find out that when you move to the cloud, what actually makes you move to the cloud is there's going to be a VPC. So there's going to be like a virtual private network that you have that is private to you, right? So um, that signifies your move to the cloud, right? But again, sometimes people move to the cloud. Sometimes you're moving directly to the cloud. Other times, maybe you're already on premise and you're trying to move to the cloud. So it means that you'll be thinking about, okay, during the transition phase, what do you need? And that's why you see some people who set up like a direct connect to their VPC during the migration, right? So that would help them, right? Sometimes you can do like a VPN connection as a backup, right? For you to do the migration. Cool. All that is going to happen obviously over you know, the the network connectivity that you've done. You're going to do your migration. But once your migration is done, so you're now like inside of the AWS account. What do you think happens next? So one thing that is a pattern that is out there that you need to know, because once you understand this pattern, it begins to unlock a lot of the other patterns that you know inside of AWS. And I'm going to show you how this is currently being used in a lot of places, right? Such that if you understand the concept, you won't battle with any of those services that uses this pattern, right? So there's really the concept of service, like VPC to VPC connection, right? So if you think about in an AWS account, usually you need like a VPC pairing, right? For one VPC to talk to the other, right? If you're not doing VPC pairing, you're either doing something like transit gateway, right? Somehow you need like connectivity between the VPCs before they can talk to themselves, right? But there is also another way you can do it, and that's like using VPC endpoint service. When you use like a VPC endpoint service, you can actually connect two VPCs to themselves, right? Service wise, right? So expose one service from one VPC to the other service, to the other VPC without any connection, right? Whether without any more or less like setting up transit gateway or setting up VPC pairing. And the point is that there are many ways you can look at this. Sometimes it's your own VPC you're dealing with. In this case, sometimes it's your VPC. So the service VPC, client VPC could be you. So you could own the service VPC on one end. Maybe the client VPC is also yours, right? But there are cases where you own the service VPC, but the client VPC is actually not yours. It's maybe a client VPC, more or less like someone that is external to your organization, right? And you know that when you do VPC pairing, you're more or less like pairing two complete VPCs together. You wouldn't want to do that. Also, if you want to do transit gateway, that's just a lot of complexity. If you want to like connect to a different, like you want like a client who is more or less like external to you, you want him to just use your service. Do you have to go through transit gateway for that to happen, or do you need to pair the entire VPC for that to happen? And that's why there is actually a less people don't really use it as much as they should be using it, but it's a very powerful service, and it's called the VPC endpoint service. The whole idea is that you can actually connect, as we are going to, I'm going to show on this call, you can actually connect two VPCs to themselves without VPC, without more or less like VPC pairing or using transit gateway. Any of the VPC connectivity that you've known that I've taught till now, you can actually connect two VPCs together, provide one service to the other VPC without having actually pairing the VPCs nor doing transit gateway. Okay, so what would that look like? Implementation wise is very simple. So the service VPC itself has to use NLB is critical for that to happen. So you need like a network load balancer that is going to more or less like serve traffic. So it's the NLB has to serve the service. So whatever service you have in the service VPC needs like a network load balancer to do that. That's the only integration that VPC endpoint service knows. So you start from there. So the service VPC would expose something using network load balancer, right? And that network load balancer is exposed as a VPC endpoint service. And I'm going to show you in the AWS account many things that are exposed that way, but you seem not to know. It depends if you've used them, but actually a lot of services that are already exposed that way. So the NLB will expose a service using using VPC endpoint service. And then in the other VPC is where you're creating the interface endpoint. And that interface endpoint is actually what gives you access to the service VPC, right? all private and all without the internet. Okay, so I'm going to take you to the AWS account to see how you use this today. Um, we're going to come back to this diagram later, but I'm actually just going to take you there to see how you actually use this today in an AWS account. So let me see if I can open this screen on the other side and show you what that looks like. Let me share my other screen. Let's see. I'm going to close this one. So if you see your AWS account, most times we go to VPC endpoints. Most times people do. Let me zoom in a bit because we'll need some real estate. Okay. So some people go to VPC endpoints. It's good you know what powers it behind the scenes. So people go to endpoints, for example. You go to endpoints and VPC, and sometimes you try to create a particular endpoint, right? So you go and say you create an endpoint, but here what you're really creating is you're creating an interface endpoint for the most part, right? Sometimes you're basically just creating, so you see a lot of interface endpoints. And then you ask yourself, what are all these services that are on the left, right? You see a lot of service names, right? So sometimes you can do S3, for example. You can do which of them? Let me just pick this first one. You can see it's an interface endpoint, but you see it has a service name, right? So what we are going to be doing on this call is that we are going to be building our own. We want to build a service. So see this service as the service VPC that I'm talking about, right? So we actually want to build a service that we can also expose to a client, right? In this case, AWS has a number of services they've actually exposed to us and that we can use here, but we can also expose ours to external clients, okay? Which is what I'm going to do in this call, okay? So usually here you create an interface endpoint. It's going to create an ENI in your account, and with that ENI, you can actually connect to S3 privately. You don't need to do anything, right? Remember, the S3 you're connected to is somewhere, but you don't really care about the connectivity that happens between the two network, okay? Which is what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to show you what it looks like in code. So what I'm going to do on the call here is to show you the code that is needed, because it will be hard for me to more or less like create both VPCs, right? Both VPCs in the AWS console. That's going to be stressful, right? So what I'm going to do in this call is to create the VPCs using code. So using Terraform, infrastructure as code. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to walk you through what it looks like. Very simple VPCs, okay? So before this call, I'd already installed Terraform. Terraform is basically easy to install. So if you go to terraform.com or their website, you basically can install Terraform, okay? So I've done that. Let me see if there's a way I can zoom this a bit in. Cool. Okay, I think it's better this way. This is Cursor, by the way. That's the ID I use. But I'm just going to show you what I have. So what I shared before, I showed you a service and I showed you a client. Both of them are VPCs, and I also took you to the account and I was showing you I was showing you when you try to create an interface endpoint, you are basically trying to connect to a service that AWS has exposed. And in this call, we were trying to expose our own service, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to show you the service part of it. Um, yes, so the service part of it is very simple. So what I'm doing here is basically I'm doing very simple stuff. I'm just doing a service VPC, which is what I'm doing. Very simple. I'm not creating my own module. Rather, I'm using an existing module. It's called VPC-AWS. The name itself is service. Decider is what you should look at. The good thing is, if you followed me on this call, some of these things will begin to sound familiar, right? Which is the good reason why I basically took the time to do that introduction. But you can begin to see we're creating a cider. We're using a cider. In this case, we're also creating three AZs, right? And then this allowed cider, there's a reason why it's here, just basically for us to um, allow the other cider, right? The service VPC in this, the client VPC in this case, we'll use it at some point. But the most important thing you should take note of is there is really need for like a cider, and then there is really need for the AZs that you're going to be deploying it to. Okay. So if you look at the VPC itself, there's nothing big, there's no big deal. You can see I'm only providing, so if you go into this module, you'll see that it gives you room for you to actually provide public subnets, private subnets. In this case, I'm only going with private subnets. So I only need private subnet, just to tell you that the network we are creating is actually going to be completely private. Okay. So enable DNS host name is obviously we want that, and we also need enable DNS support. So now that the service, the VPC is done, I will create the VPC. So if you know Terraform, it's just Terraform apply. Okay, so that's what I'm going to, I think that's the wrong command. I'm just going to do Terraform apply. So while it is doing Terraform apply, we'll see what's the plan like. So we'll see what it's trying to create. And we're also going to the account and verify it, okay, and see what exactly is created in the account. So you can see, let's look at the plan. Let's take a look at the plan, just a little, and see what it's trying to create. That's the good thing about IAC, because I'm doing it this way so that I don't have to go through the stress of trying to. But you can see, I think it's creating a bunch of stuff. It's going to create a route table. These things we've done them manually before, right? But now we're doing it easily. But the point is that I know you know all these things. Private route table, for example, is creating the association because we're using an existing VPC module. Okay. So the next thing I'm just going to do is it says, do I want to apply the change? I'm going to do yes. Okay. So I'll do yes. And see, let's give it time for it to. So it's creating a VPC. So I'll go into the account while it's creating this here. I'm just going to go to my VPC place and see what's happening. So I'll go to VPC, and then once I open VPC here, I will see that one VPC is being created. You can see before I didn't have this service VPC, but there's now a service VPC that is being created. It has 3 subnets, right? It basically has 3 subnets. This is blocking my view to some extent. Let me see if I can move it a bit. Okay, I think this is better for me. Cool. So it has 3 subnets. Okay. It has route tables. Okay. It also has their own route table, and then that's really pretty much it. So let's see. It has created. Everything has been created using IAC, and you can see it only has like. Let me refresh this page so that you see what it has. So what you notice is that it has 3 subnets, right? 4 route tables. It doesn't really have an internet gateway. So the internet gateway you see here is basically the one that is with the default VPC. So we are not creating a new one. If you check, it doesn't have a NAT gateway, so you can't see it actually can go into the internet. So we don't have that provision already. So we have a service VPC at this point, okay? What I'm going to do again is go back to the console and create a client VPC, okay? The difference you should take note of is that in the service VPC, I'm using a CIDR of 10.10.16. And the client VPC, I'm using a CIDR of 10.20.16. Really, that's just the difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the directory for the client. So I'm just going to clear this. I'm here. I'm just going to do Terraform apply, okay? This I'm doing it for the client now. Although I think it's not going to work here because I think it needs me to provide a service endpoint name. But again, I'm not even using it here. So I basically can take this out. I think it needs me to provide this value. So I'm going to take it out because I'm not doing it. So the thing is, the good news is I have a site that I'm building that will give you more or less like it's just going to give you this as a workbook, right? Right now, it's like I'm doing 2 of it. I'm doing a part of it as IAC just to make it fast so that I'm not going to the console to generate all the VPCs and all that. But I'm working on the site, and this is like a workbook that you see, more or less like it gives you the step. You can see basically what it will take for you to create the client VPC. You just take the code, implement it. If you want to pretty much ask more questions, you can. But I'm going to take this. So I've taken that away. And then I'm going to apply do Terraform apply again. So remember, if you look at it, okay, I think I've not saved this. That's why it's still asking me. So I need to save and then apply it again. So just know that everything we're going to do at the end will be in the console. But what we're using these to do right now is just to create the 2 VPCs so that I don't have to stress going to create a VPC, going to create a route table, all that. So this is an identical VPC, but on the client side, okay? So I'm just going to do yes. So I'm creating a VPC. So think about it. I'm using Terraform here to create 2 VPCs, one for the service and one for the client. And then after that, we'll go to the console and do every other thing. Okay. We'll go to the console and do every other thing. Because if I have to create all this, it's going to take time, like creating subnets, creating route tables. I don't want to do that. And I think I've showed VPC on this call severally. Okay. So let's go back to the account. But now we should have 2 VPCs. So if I go back here, if we go back to the VPCs, it's also a private VPC. So if you check it out, we now have 2 VPCs, right? So let me refresh this. There is now a client VPC and there is now a service VPC. Ultimately, we want 2 VPCs. One is the client, one is the service. The client will connect to the service without VPC routing, without VPC peering without any transit gateway connection, all private, right? Service VPC will expose a service, and the client VPC will just connect with it. Okay. So what we've done, we've created two VPCs. That's all we use Terraform to do, to bootstrap it, to make it fast. So we now have two VPCs created for us by Terraform, right? And they're all private VPCs. You can see one has this, the other one has this. Okay, so where do we go from here? So let's set up the service now. Let's set up the service. So we'll go to the service VPC in this case. So what we'll do is that for you to be able to use this pattern, so let me go back to what I shared in the diagram. So I'm going to go to iPad and show you what I shared, right? So if I scroll a bit down and I zoom this in a bit, so we've looked at the top that for you to create this connectivity, two VPCs need to talk to themselves, which is what we've done. The next thing we want to do is that the service VPC itself needs to expose the service using a network load balancer, right? So that's the next phase. What we've just done before, we just bootstrap the two VPCs, right? So the next point for us to really do now is to expose the service from the service VPC. And for you to do that, you basically need to do that via like a network load balancer. Okay. So that's the next thing we need to do. So what are we going to do? Let's create an EC2 instance. So we'll create an EC2 instance. Because if an NLB comes up, it needs a service. It needs something behind it, right? To more or less like, expose the service. So what we're going to be doing is we'll create an instance. I'm not sure why. I think I have an instance running. Oh, okay. I'll get rid of this one, but I need to create my own instance for this demo. So I'm going to do terminate this one. This one has been it's been here running for long now. Terminate. I'm going to terminate this one. Okay. Let me just leave this one. I think this was created as part of the demo. So we are going to launch the one that we need for this class. Okay. So I'm going to do launch EC2 instance. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to call it service. Remember, we're trying to build the service part of it. So I'm going to do service EC2. Okay. That's what we're going to be doing. So we'll use Amazon Linux 2023. We will create we don't need a key pair, right? We don't really need a key pair. We don't need to log in into it. We are not going to be using so this one is assigned public because here is still pointing to the default. Oh, I'm not sharing the screen that you're meant to be seeing. Sorry. I'm happy I found that quick. So let me share the screen. I'm sharing the wrong screen. Okay. So this is the screen you should be seeing. So what am I doing? In the other screen, I told you we need a service part of it, right? So we need a service part of it, which is exactly what I'm doing now. In the service part, I'm trying to create a service, right? If you have a service, you have to expose it, whether it's EKS, whether it's ECS, you have to expose the service. So that's what I'm doing now. So what I'm doing is I created a service EC2, in this case, service EC2. And I think this is basic stuff. All this I could have done it via code, but I wanted you to see it in the UI, what it's going to look like. So I'm going to give it a T2 micro. It's fine. Proceed without a key pair. Here, I'm not going to use the default VPC. We have two VPCs now. So this is the service VPC. This is the one I'm going to use because that's the one that is exposing the service, right? To keep things straightforward, I'm going to keep it in private US West 2A. Okay, so keep it in because we're launching one. You could launch 2, 3 just to make it highly available. In this case, we'll launch it in one, right? So in this case, we really cannot assign public IP, right? Because it's a private VPC, right? So and then we want to create a security group, right? So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to go back to code and look for the CIDR. I'm going to create a simple security group. So I'll call it service. I'm going to do this and call it service. I hope you guys can see my screen, but I'll call it service. My laptop is slow now, and that's one of the issues I have using Windows to do this, right? I'm doing so much on my screen and it's slowing me down. So service EC2 SG, okay? That's what I'm going to call it. I'll call it service EC2. I think this is slower than I wanted it, or that I want it is slow. Okay, so I don't need SSH from anywhere, but I basically need, for now, just to keep things simple, I need all traffic let me just remove this or add a new security group rule and then remove the old one. And then I'm just going to call it all traffic for now, right? The custom CIDR is custom. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the VPC CIDR of, what do you call it, of the um, going to use the VPC CIDR of the service. So I'm just going to use the VPC CIDR, sorry, of the service, not the client. Okay, so I'm just going to use the VPC CIDR that I have of the service. I'm just going to use that. So I'll paste it here. I'll say allow traffic from inside VPC. Okay, so from inside VPC, just to make it clear, okay, what we're trying to do. And then once that is done, I can go with everything can be default. The only thing I'm going to bring in is a user data script, right? We've done some of these things in the past. I'm just going to copy this simple one that says this is a web server. It's just going to return welcome page, right? So which is exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go here, and then so it says echo a welcome page. It will install HTTPD to enable it, and then it's going to paste this and then just send that to the UI. I think with that, we're good. Security group is set up. So I'm going to launch the EC2 instance. Let me just take note of the subnet again. So US West private. So this is what we're doing now. So we've created one EC2 instance, right? Cool. An EC2 instance is creating. And the next thing we want to do is we want to create a network load balancer, right? So if you think about what we're doing, we have a VPC, the service VPC. It has a service. The service is just what we've mimicked right now. It's that EC2 that you saw is the service we are using right now. But that service has to be exposed, right? You need something to expose it, especially in network load balancer in this case. Okay. So what we're going to do is we'll go to NLB. So we'll go to just type ALB. So EC2, it's an EC2 feature. So I'm going to go here, load balancers, right? Here, I'm going to create a target group. Target groups, I've opened it on a different tab. Load balancer, I'll open on a different tab. Trust me, these things that I'm showing you is something that, like I said, the website I'm working on, many of these things will be IAC, really. But sometimes it's good I show you what it looks like in the UI. But you can see we're doing a lot. And that's why sometimes it's always encouraged IAC. You do IAC on top of what you already know in the console, right? So we have a load balancer here. We have a target group here. Let's see the instance that is created. I need the IP address of the instance. So I'm just going to go here. This one is initializing. I wanted to terminate this one since I thought I terminated it. My web server, why is it not terminating? Let me see what's happening. All right, I think that one is prepared to be terminated. So this one is the one we care about. Let's look for the IP address, the private IP address. So I'm just going to go here and copy the private IP address. I'm going to create a new target group for a network load balancer. Here to ask you what kind of load balancer do you want to create, and then like what kind of target group. In this case, I'm going to use IP address. Okay, so I'll do IP address. It works for ALB, NLB, gateway load balancer, right? So I'm going to call it EC2 target group, right? Target group, okay? And then the protocol is, in this case, the target group is, let's see, TCP, yes. Because we are going to be using it for a network load balancer, the protocol has to be TCP, right? So you can see it's clearly stated here, use with network load balancer. This target group is going to be used with a network load balancer. So we have to use TCP, right? So the target group is 80, IPv4. It's not using the default VPC in this case. We are still working on the service VPC. So it has to be service. The health check will be, it can happen on HTTP. It can happen on the traffic ports, which is fine. We need 2 healthy threshold, timeout is 10. Healthy threshold is too much. We can use 2, okay? Unhealthy is fine, timeout is this, interval is this. We're fine with the tag. We'll just do next. So we're just going to create a target group. Remember, this target group is basically target for the network load balancer once we launch it, okay? So I'm going to do that. This is the service VPC. Enter an IP address from a VPC. You can manually, I'm not really doing this one. I'm just going to do, okay, yes. So I need to add IP addresses, right? To define more or less like, so no, this is not really what I want to do. So port 80, choose this, review targets. Okay, yes, I think this is really where I register my target. Okay, so I'm just going to go here. Remember that on this side, we did pick the private IP of the EC2 instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to register that private IP, and then I'm going to do 80. So pretty much include as a pending target. So it has been included. I'm going to do next, and then I'm going to create the target group. Okay. So at this point, what we're just doing is that we're creating an EC2 machine. We created an EC2 machine that's basically a very simple service. We've created a target group to target that EC2 machine, but we've made sure it is TCP because that's what NLB needs, right? Good. So what we can now do right now is unused. We know it's going to be like that. Let's now go back to creating our load balancer. So we're going to create a network load balancer. So this is, we'll do create a network load balancer in this case. And the reason is because we want to do VPC endpoint service. That needs a network load balancer. So we'll call it a service, service NLB, right? So service NLBs, in this case, is internal facing. Okay, it's not going to be reached from the internet. Okay, it's internal facing. It's going to be on the service side of things. I'm going to use all the subnets available. So US West 2A, US West 2B. Um, so it's just going to pick, assign, 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 right? For security group, I would need to create one. So I'm going to create a new security group for now. For the NL, before NLB usually don't support security groups, but they've started supporting security groups now. So I'll call it NLBSG. Okay, so just in case we want to tune it later. Okay, so NLBSG. All these I had created, as code before. So I'll just call it NLBSG. The VPC is going to be the service VPC. Just make sure we're still working on the service VPC. We've not moved yet. Okay. So inbound rule for now, I'm just going to say all traffic for now. So I'm just going to do all traffic. But here I'm just going to do custom, and then I'm going to paste that CIDR. So the one that we had before. So there is this one. So we're just going to paste the CIDR. This is allow traffic from inside VPC, right? So inside VPC, outbound, we obviously want it to be able to go everywhere. So allow everywhere, right? Everywhere. I mean, outbound is safe. So we're allowing outbound for inbound for now. In fact, while we're here, let me just add a new rule just to make sure we're allowing our traffic also for now for the, what do you call it? The service VPC. That we've not created yet, but that we're going to create. So let's look for it. The client VPC, sorry. So I'm just going to look for that CIDR, and then I'm also going to paste it here, and then say allow traffic, traffic from the client VPC. Okay. So we have these two created, and I'm just going to create the security group. Cool. So it's been created. I now need to refresh this and find that NLB. So the NLBSG is here, which is what I'm going to use. So the thing is now asking us for, so it's trying to create a listener. And in this case, it's saying TCP port 80, where should I forward it to? So I'm going to create a target, forward it to the target group we already created before, right? So that's already fine. Every other thing I can leave as default. So you can have like a global accelerator on top of a network load balancer, but I don't think we need that for this demo, okay? So I'm going to do next. So I'm going to create the network load balancer, right? So we're creating a network load balancer. So what I'm just going to do is now go to the network load balancer because we need to make sure the network load balancer is live, like it's working. And at this point, we've connected it to an EC2 instance. So we should be able to go to that network load balancer and see the health check and make sure that it's passing, right? Things are working fine. So let's see. It's provisioning. It's going to take some time to provision. But let me actually verify that our EC2 instance is working well. So a quick way we can do that, by now, is you can go to Cloud Shell, right? So I can go to Cloud Shell and test that EC2 instance itself, just to be sure that that EC2 instance is working. So what I can do is I can create a new environment in a VPC. So create a VPC environment, just say service VPC, I'll call it a service VPC, okay? Service VPC is going to use the VPC, this, I'll put it in US West 2A and security group. which security group should I use now? I'll just use the NLB security group. It does not matter in this case. Let me create it and see what happens. Okay. Here, I want to see if I can actually remember this EC2 instance, the NLB, they're all private right now. You can't reach them from the internet. So the only way we can actually test them is to pretty much more or less like create something that is inside the VPC and try to use that to connect. But again, even if I don't do that, once this network load balancer is live, I should be able to tell if it's working or not. So let me just go to the network load balancer. It's still provisioning, so it's going to take some time. So, but I just want to use Cloud Shell to do more or less like my own quick test, just to make sure that the service is working, right? So the service could be an application that is running inside a Docker container. It could be EKS, whatever it is, right? So what we can do is let's look for the IP address. So the IP address of that EC2 instance, which is what we gave to the network load balancer, is that IP. I've copied it. So I'm just going to do call-i and then do HTTP and then put the route, right? So failed, could not connect to the server. In this case, I'm not entirely sure. Could not connect, failed to connect, could mean many things, but let's see. Let me go back, because you have to verify the service is actually running before the NLB can actually do anything with it. So let's see the service that we're using. I just want to be sure it's running something. So let's see the security group that it's using. We're actually allowing our traffic. Is this the NLB security group? EC2 instance. It's using this service, EC2 security. It's allowing our traffic from the VPC and from the VPC and which other VPC, and it's allowing all the outbound traffic. So ideally, this should be good to go. Let's see. Yeah, it's actually failing to connect at this point. Let me actually check the VPC itself just to make sure it's set up correctly. Because like you're aware, when I created the VPC, I did create more or less like a mini VPC, right? It didn't have a lot of the other things. Let me just check the route tables and be sure there is like the appropriate route that we're looking. So I'm just going to filter this based on or search here for that VPC. Okay. You see, we are beginning to deal with multiple VPCs, and this is how it is in the cloud. It's not going to be where you just have one default VPC. So let me look at the route table for Private West. It has this, it has local subnet association is there. So it looks set up correctly. And the EC2 instance itself, it's in a running state. It doesn't look like it has any issues. So let's just give it some time. We can also we'll verify this also from the NLB side of things. So let's go to the network load balancer and see if it is still provisioning. It's active. So let's see the target group, and then let's see the health of that target group to see if it's actually healthy. Okay. So health check, one target group, initial. So here, I think it's trying to do health check. We have a service, a server that is there. I think now the NLB is actually trying to establish connection, and I'm hoping that the connection goes well. But let's give it some time. So it's doing initial. It's unhealthy. So the health check failed. 10.5. Yeah. So I think this boils down to what we saw on the other side, because it looks like this IP address, I'm not sure what is happening at this point. Let me just check something. EC2 instance is this one. Let me see. Now it looks like the service itself. I don't think I'll be able to connect unless I do like an EC2. Let me see. Let me just assign a role, attach a role to it, and see if I can find something. So security, modify IAM role, and use one of those roles that I have. I think I have my EC2 role. I'm not sure which is which, but I think I used to have a role that allows SSM. So let me see. Let me see if this is going to do the trick and let us in. Let's see. Let's see if we try to connect. Because now I'm not, let me see which AMI is actually using. I think it's using Linux 2023, but I still have to check the logs to see. Yeah, it's using, so we have the right, and we have the right user data script. Let me just be sure that the what do you call it now? Security. So it's, if you look at this error, it doesn't look like port 80 is what it's trying to check. Let me check that in EC2 instance. Security. We're actually allowing all ports. Oh, sorry, what's happening here? Source is this. Let's check the SG again. Let's see, allow traffic from inside. Source is this. I did the inbound rule. Yeah, so let me just fix this. So this is allow from inside, then allow traffic from client VPC. Okay, so I'm just going to do this. So I'm save that, and then check the load balancer. It definitely will not work because I can already tell it's not healthy. The traffic port itself is TCP, or let's even do HTTP health check. We'll just do dash and do the same thing. Success is 200, and just save the changes. And let's try again. That is EC2 instance. I need to go and see what's happening. But it looks like, from what I can tell, it looks like the EC2 instance itself is not, and now it's actually not public. So there's no way I'll be able to more or less like see it from the outside. I have to go in. Let me see if this allows me again. It doesn't. Okay, it cannot. I think it is because I did create the EC2 instance without. So let me just reboot the instance. We may lose the IP address, but it's fine. We'll fix it. Let's see. So let's refresh it and give it some time to come up again. We're just rebooting. So let's click on it and see, connect. And then, yeah, I think SSM, I think that's what I should have done. So that I can, because the thing, that's one thing, when you're working with private, you also have to make sure you set up enough things to get you in to troubleshoot to know when it's not working as expected. Because in this case, everything is private basically. So but let's give the EC2 instance time to come up again. Okay, so let's go to the load balancer. If we try and see the target group, let's see. Let me refresh this and see what's happening. Yeah, one is still initial. I think it's trying to do the check again, but the first time it did, it failed. So let's give it time. So it's doing the initial check again. It's doing the initial check, but again, I'm not entirely sure it's going to, I'm not, at this point, it should just work. Not sure why, but let's see if we can get into the EC2 machine. Here, all traffic is, this is good to go. What did you do differently? Nothing. I did not do anything. Let's see, we're just waiting for it to come up. It's still not, I don't think it's healthy yet. We're still waiting for it, but I don't think it's healthy yet. So we'll do, yeah, it's initial health checks, timeout. Let me just even adjust this. The interval is too long for me for this test. We can keep it short. We can just do 5 seconds. Okay, timeout. Let's do, yeah, I can leave timeout as is. So that the let's just do 2. I'm just editing the health check so that it can happen fast. It's too slow in this case. Other than that, let's try this again and see what's happening. It doesn't even um, fail to connect. So in this case, it doesn't look, I just suspect it looks like the service itself inside of that. So the easy to remember, we just did a simple, um, what do you call it? A simple service that is supposed to run inside there. My guess is that service is actually not running. So let's refresh and do, what do you call it? Um this one and try to connect. SSM agent is also not even up. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that for the sake of time, let me launch another one. Okay, so I'm just going to, as you know, in the real world, you have multiple applications serving the traffic. So let's just do service. Um, let's do service EC2 instance, and then let's do the OSs. Um, this is Linux 2023. We're going to be free tier eligible. Proceed without a key pair. We're going to edit the VPC. Remember, it's still the service VPC we're still working with. So the service VPC is where we are. We'll use US West 2A. Security group, we're going to select one of the ones we've created, which is this one. Advanced networking configuration, do we need anything there? We don't, right? We do not. So, and then for the user data script is really, maybe this one, when I'm creating it, I'm just going to create the, what do you call it? I'm going to create the, select the role, instance role immediately. Okay, so my EC2 role, I think this one has what I'm looking for, right? And then the next thing I just need to do is to give it one of the user data script we've always used, right? So I'm just going to copy this one. I'm just going to paste it. Ideally, it should work. Like this should basically get us started. We don't need to do extra. So I'm just going to launch the EC2 instance, right? So this is the second one. And let's see what happens. So this one is launching the target group because I've not been able to log into that machine. So let's see this one. It's still unhealthy, right? So it says the health check failed, basically. So my guess is that EC2 instance is not healthy, right? So I need to go into it to know what's happening. So let me go to the instances. Yeah, if you remember in these classes, we've created so many, like we've created so many EC2 instances that by now this should just work out of the box. But that's how it happens when you're demoing, right? So let's see, this is the first one we created. That one is initializing. Let me try to connect again. For the fact that this SSM agent is not online also gives me, oh, I think I probably know. Um, yeah. Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Hmm. Interesting. Um, okay. I think I have an idea what is happening. I think I have an idea what is happening. So what I'm going to do is, hmm, okay. I think I didn't factor this when I was doing this, but I think I have an idea of what's happening because here we're doing DNF install, DNF update, right? But right now that EC2 instance cannot go to the internet. So that's really what is happening. If you see, so the thing is that we are trying to create service to service connection without pairing the two VPCs. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect two VPCs together without pairing them, without using transit gateway, right? But this the first VPC that we're actually trying to do stuff, the EC2 machine is trying to install. There's no way it can do that because it cannot go to the internet, right? So that's actually the problem. So what I'm going to do is to see this VPC module and see what I can do. Just give me, let me fix it. Um, let's just go to, let me see here. So what we can do is that we can go to the service VPC and do just the way we have private subnets. I think you saw me creating this, right? So what we can do is, I think we can also do public subnet, right? Yeah, I'm just now, it looks like for the service VPC, we need at least internet connectivity to be able to install on the OS and do stuff, right? So what I'm just going to do for this is just to set up public subnet. Okay, so this is still service VPC, not client VPC. So I'm going to go here. I'm typing, it's not working. What's happening? Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to call this public subnets. And then what I'm going to do is I'm still going to use the same AZs. It's still going to use this. It's still going to use this group for IDs in this. The only thing I want to do is let me try this one first. I think I'll try this. So I'm going to go back to the service and do Terraform apply. Okay, so I'm just going to do Terraform apply and see what I get. Okay, so just do Terraform apply. We didn't have private, we only had private subnets. So that I think that's what's happening, because now we're trying to install in the EC2. So that DNF, we can't see it, right? But it's not going to work because it's trying to go to the internet. So now what you notice is that we actually, this will create more things, right? So it's going to create an IPv, I don't know if it's going to create a internet gateway. So public subnet is going to be created. Just trying to be sure that, trying to see what else is it? Okay, so it's going to create an internet gateway, which is what we really need. So we need an internet gateway, but I actually want to see the subnet being created. So it's going to create all that. It's going to create, what are the subnets being created? That's just what I want to validate, the first subnet. What's the CIDR for this subnet now? Okay, so let me just do Terraform plan, and then cut it to, or just do out and do plan.txt. Okay, let's sorry, let's do, what's that command again? I think it's help. Let me check. I think we can actually send it out. Yes, so it's out. So I'm just going to do out and do Terraform dot plan. Okay, so I actually want to see what is going to be. I know it's going to create some things that I'm interested in, but I also just want to do more or less like see it. So it's going to do its thing. The difference is just not going to apply. It's going to plan and then create a local file that I can take a look at. Okay. So it should have created a plan now. So I'm here. I'm just going to check it, open anyway. Text editor, it's fine. Oh, interesting. Okay, so let me just go back to something and see. 10.10.32.20. Is that subnet not already taken? Just to be sure we have that subnet. Let's check the subnet we've created, because yeah, we need to create none of like subnets that are not overlapping, right? So we've created 32.0, blah blah blah. So we basically need to start from, so this is 0, 1, 2, 3. So we need to start from 4. So I'm just going to do IDs. Let me see what we can do here. Let's see. Just thinking of how we're going to create those subnets, because the way it is right now, it looks like it wants to create these subnets. Let me actually check this model and see how they define it. Okay, so many of these models are actually Terraform models that you can create or you can use. So let me check the model and see. It's here. Let's see the VPC model. Let's find the VPCs we want to create. In this case, they did create it static, right? So I'm trying to see how I can actually yeah, I'm actually trying to see an easy way out. Okay, so what we can do is that we can do so this is 101, but that's really not what I want. This is 101. So what has even been created? What has been created? I think I think there's an easy way out. So there is already 10.10, .0, .32.16, Yeah, I can do maybe 10.10. Cider. I will start from a different cider completely. So if you look at the cider we're using 10.20, 16. So what I'm going to do here is basically this is just like quick way to get it working. Okay, so I'm just going to go here and do this and say start from let me just do 64, 10. So I'm going to do 64. Okay, so I'm going to do 10.20, start from 64. Okay, no, this is actually me still doing the private. It should be the, what do you call it now? It should be the public subnet. Okay, so I'm just going to go here, change the public subnet to use 10.64. Okay, let it start from there. Is what I want. 10.20, 10.20. This is service VPC. 10.20.64.0. Okay, cool. So let's try this again. Control C, and then just do Terraform apply. Okay, let's try it again this time. So what I'm doing is here, I wasn't anticipating creating public subnets, but now I need it. So what we're just doing is we're saying create a public subnet, but start from 64 upward. Okay, so that's what it's going to do. So if you look at it now, it's going to look a bit different. So you can see 10.20. This is what now? Which one is this? Public subnet 32, 20, 10.20, 32. Let's see. It's all the size of this. Did I even save this file? Activities ending soon. They need me to do some verification. Let me just do that. You know what we'll do? Let's just go this route. Okay, so what we can do is that let me just do this. So the last one there was when you check it, it's 32. The next one will be 48. So let's just play with it. So let's do main service. We'll do 48 starting from 0. We'll create almost the same size. Okay, so 48 here. We will do a different one and do 48 plus 32 is like 50. Sorry, this plus another 16 is 50, 62. Right, I think so. Why is my math failing me now? 48 plus 16 is what? Remember, we already have 32, right? So if you add 32 plus 16, that's already 48. If you do 48 plus another 16, that is going to be 50, 58, 64, right? So 64 will be here. And then we can do the last one, right? So 64 plus another 16. Let's just do that. Let's do, why do I keep clicking this insert? So we'll do this. And then we'll do 64 plus another 16 is 70. Let's just do 70. What now? Let's just do it. 80. Okay. So let's do this. Let's do this, and then let's apply again. Okay. I'm just trying to. Yes, they can be. They can't. They can be assigned. I basically need to tweak the Terraform because right now it's still doing. It's still doing. It's still not breaking it properly. It's still not breaking it properly the way I want, and I don't want to battle with it. Yeah. So this is fine. This is really the side I want. So I'm just going to go here and do yes. Okay. Just to make the results exactly what I want. Okay, I don't want to. I just want to keep it as is. So let me just do delete the plan. So it's been created. So what you notice is that if I refresh this, there is now more subnet. So we did create, there's 32, there's 64, there is 48, there is 64. I think it's 48 to 64. That was like a huge, is that a gap needed? But it's fine. So we just created some, they still have almost similar IP addresses. You can see that's the range. I could actually have it do it in Terraform, just do it programmatically, but that's not what this class is about right now. So I'm just going to go to Internet Gateway. So if you check, there is one that has now been created. If I go to NAT Gateways, NAT Gateways is here. You see that, let me see. Did it even create a NAT gateway? Oh, it looks like, so enable NAT gateway is what I need to add. Okay, so I need to, because I need a NAT gateway for those private instances to be able to go to the internet. And the good thing is I'm doing this via IAC, so I should be able to just delete it once I'm done. Okay, so apply. So let's add a NAT gateway, because I want a NAT gateway so that the private, right now I don't have anything launched in the public, in the private, what do you call it, in the public public subnet, right? And I want to keep it that way, but at least I need from the private subnet, I need them to be able to go out, maybe download stuff from the internet and all that. So it's going to create, in this case, it's creating too many, but it's fine. Once the class is done, I'm just going to do Terraform destroy, and then we should be good to go. So it's creating, I'm going to give it some time. So I'm going to go NAT gateway, refresh. So with that, it's going to take some time to launch, okay? But now we know that if you launch anything now, it will be able to go to the internet. I think that's the problem that guy was having. Because now the service, so when we run the command here, when we run this command, right, you can see it connected. It's not like, it wasn't a timeout. Timeout will tell you, timeout can tell you that it's more or less like a, what do you call it, security group issue. But in this case, it's not, because it's trying to connect. But the service itself is not responding. That's what is happening. So that's what we need to fix. And then we can continue. Let's see. That's why IAC is sometimes better, because some of these things you can just bootstrap them and then pretty much just, it's easy. So public subnet needs the NAT gateway just for service to work, right? So the private subnet, the way NAT gateways work is that the NAT gateways, they need to live in the public subnet, and then your private subnet will have to go through that NAT gateway to go to the internet. So that's what we're doing right now. So we're putting a NAT gateway in the public subnet, using that from the private subnet to connect. Right now, our private subnet, the EC2 instance, it does not have connection to the internet. It cannot go anywhere. Like, that's the problem we're having. And that's why our health check is failing. We can't even call the machine. So let's give it some time. Let's see. So there are like a couple of NAT gateways that are available. So let's try creating a new EC2 instance now, okay? So we'll create a new EC2 instance. This one should be, let's just say service, we'll call it service web server, right? We've created multiples now, but we'll do service, service web server, okay? We'll create that, and then we'll do instance type is, it's AMI Linux 2023. We don't need a keep here, so we can proceed without a keep here. So I'm just going to go here and do no keep here, select the security group. I will create, first we need to change the VPC, right? We're still on the service VPC. So this is service VPC. Remember, the only thing we added now is just to be able to go to the internet, right? We've not, that VPC is still isolated, but we still want to be able to go to the internet. We don't have anything in the public subnet, just so you know. Okay, so everything is fine. We'll select the security group. We'll call it the service EC2 security group that we've created before. So everything is still basic stuff. I think the only thing I need to now add is to now flesh out the user data script, which I feel now it's going to work. So we're just going to go here. Where is it? This one. Copy this, and then paste it whatever we're trying to launch. So we'll do paste. And then let's just scroll up and be sure that everything is fine. I think it's good. So I'm just going to launch the instance. So remember, we've launched 2 instances before that did not work, because yes, that instruction requires it to fetch stuff from the internet, and that's not going to work. So let's now go back and see. Hopefully, the stored instance comes alive. So while that is ongoing, I can even get rid of the other 2. We don't really need them, right? So this is the one we need, the service web server, right? But this one, I don't need this one. So I can basically just take these ones out, okay? Don't worry, I'll fix the target group once this one is up, this service web server. Once it's up, I'm going to fix it. Yes. So right now, the only thing we have in the in the public subnet is NAT gateway. Okay. So that's all. We're just using it there to go to the internet. There is no resource. The only EC2 instance I have right now is still in the private subnet. So it's, if you check, let me just confirm that and be sure the subnet that it is. Okay, so this was actually provisioned wrongly again. So yeah, that's one of the things you get with without IEC. So I'm actually going to terminate this. Thank you for actually raising that up, because we actually threw this inside of the, what do you call it, in the public subnet. It's meant to be in the private subnet. Thank you for mentioning that. So this, we don't need, the whole idea is not to have anything in the private subnet. Okay, we do need internet connectivity. Like if you are in AWS, you can be hosted privately, but you still have to go to the internet to do stuff. All right, that's when you need NAT gateway, internet gateway to go out, right? But in this case, we actually are trying to create a server that is completely private, and then expose it as an endpoint service to a different VPC without any connection, no transit gateway, no VPC pairing. Okay, so I have to, make sure I'm doing it the right way now. So this, I'm going to edit the network this time, use a service VPC, and then use the subnet. This is what I'm supposed to have selected. So I'm supposed to check and look for private. In this case, I'm going to use private US West 2A, right? These ones don't have access to the internet, and we'll see. Disable, it doesn't, it doesn't have select security group, use the service security group, which is this one. And then once that is in place, let's paste the user data script again, okay? Um, um, so we're going to go back there and try it. So we'll go advanced detail. While that is in place, I will also just set the instance profile, the role. So let's see. I think we have a room here for setting the, what do you call it? The, yeah, instance profile. So I'm going to use my EC2, my EC2 role. I'm just going to use this one. I have it already there. So I'm going to launch the instance. Okay. And so let's go back and verify. Um, So let's go back and actually check. So if you go EC2 instance, for example, just so you know, the one we're launching now, the pending one, is actually in a private subnet, right? So let's actually check what a private subnet looks like right now, just so you know there is really nothing in that private subnet that really exposes it to the internet, right? So let's go to that private subnet and see what it looks like. So we'll go subnet in this case. We'll do private. Let's just search for private. Let's select the VPC first. So we're selecting the service VPC in this case. So service VPC, and we're just going to be doing private. Okay. So here, if we look at the one we're looking at right now, this private subnet, right? If you check properly, it has a route table. And this route table right now, you can see that if it's going to the internet, it's going through the NAT gateway, right? This is standard stuff. I think we've done this before manually. And it's saying if there's local network, let it go. So now with this added, actually that download that we're doing in the user data script will work. Because now you can go to the internet, fetch resource, like, do all the things you need to do. So let's give it time for the instance now to come up. Just so you know, if we do instance, and then it looks like it's running, it's initializing. Let's look for the IP address. So we're just going to go here. Let's try. You see, now we can actually connect. You can see now you can actually you can connect. So we can actually connect if need be. But let's give it time. So let's actually go and pick the IP address and try the command we were running before, right? So we'll go back to Cloud Shell, and then we'll just do that same command, right? So just do -i, and then do HTTP, and then do this, and then do this, and then paste, right? And let's see. You can see. So this was the problem. The machine is actually good. It's not like there's nothing wrong with the machine. The only problem is that when I created it, I was trying to go the very sweet, fast route, but because I needed to be able to get to the internet, that's why it did not work. Okay. So now we have an EC2 machine that is working, that can connect to the internet, get stuff, install, Apache, and is returning HTTP 200, right? So let's go continue the task. So the task is really for us to now go back to our network load balancer, right? That's really what we're working with. So right now it has a target group. Before it was failing health check. So let's fix it. So what we're going to do is that for targets, we're just going to register a new target, right? So we'll register a new one. We'll paste the IP address here. It's an IPv. Let's move this one. Port 80 is really where you should go to. We'll include it as pending target. And Yeah, I think the health check, every other thing we set before is still fine. So we'll register it as a pending target. And then we'll go to the one that is failing. We know it's not going to work. So we can as well just remove it. So we're just going to deregister this one, right? And just get rid of it. So it's going to drain that one and then deregister it. But this one is the one that is coming. This 10.10.2, 12.7 is really the one we need. And that's why it's always good. You can verify things at different levels. Remember, we had to verify the EC2 instance itself. We know we couldn't even connect. So NLB is not going to do magic. So once we verify that from Cloud Shell, now we know that NLB definitely is going to work, right? So let's just give it some time. He's doing his initial check on this. I'm hoping it's going to be fast to do that. So he's still doing initial. He's going to drain this one, and then that'll be it. So while this is in progress, we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this. Let me just share my other screen so that you see how far are we, right? So if you think about this diagram, if you think about it now, where are we? We've created a service VPC. In there, we have a service in the form of a small EC2 machine that is just responding status code 200 right now. We've created an LLB, right? NLB can connect to that machine is what we are trying to test, right? In fact, I can already tell it's healthy. The next thing we need to create a VPC endpoint service. It's different from an interface endpoint. These we're creating a service, a VPC endpoint service. Okay. So let's go back to the screen. So whatever you see down on the diagram is what we're trying to reproduce. We've done the VPC. We've created an NLB. It is serving a service correctly. So let's go. Well, let's go to the next level. Uh, the next level will be okay. So let me share my other screen so that you see my AWS screen. No, this one. Let me just close this one. Yes, you guys can see my screen. So if you check, you can see the difference. It's now healthy, right? So the machine itself, you needed to test it in isolation, right? You don't need to rely on NLB. You can actually go to the machine, troubleshoot it, see why it's not working. So now we know the machine is working, right? So now because we have that, some people are asking, does SSN need internet? Yes, that brings us to a very crucial point. It doesn't need internet, but because it is private, for it to work, for it to use SSN, for example, you need more or less like an interface endpoint for SSN, right? When you create a private instance that doesn't have internet connectivity at all, we've shown it before on the call. You need an interface endpoint, which is what we're trying to demo. So when you say interface endpoint, what is that exactly? So we are building a service that someone can connect to using an interface endpoint. So it's the same. That was the problem because now it's a private EC2 machine. It doesn't have internet, but because there's no interface endpoint for SSM, there's no way it's going to reach SSM, right? So it's just a completely locked machine. But if there was room for more or less like you did give it more or less like you created an interface endpoint for SSM or any of this AWS service, even it being a private subnet, private, no internet connectivity, it still will reach those AWS service. But in this case, remember, our problem here is really going to the internet. It couldn't fetch resource from the internet, and we fixed that, right? So let's move forward. So now we now need to create a service. A service. We just created an isolated service, right? So now we need to create one. So what we're going to go to do is we'll go to VPC. Now, the good thing about this NLB right now is just the way you validated the EC2 instance, you also can validate the NLB. So if you go here, for example, you go to the NLB, you pick the service DNS, right? The same thing we did in Cloud Shell, you should be able to also do it here. The whole idea is you have to test things at different layers, right? Yeah, it's also working. So it's either you can reach the EC2 directly, you can reach the NLB directly. So we have a working service at this point. We've been able to establish a working service. The next thing we want to do is to now create an endpoint service, right? And then, so what we'll do is that this is a VPC. You go scroll down to the places you usually do like interface, endpoints. Let's see. So endpoints, right? So there's endpoints, which is what most people create. A lot of people create endpoints. We are creating an endpoint service. So we're going to go here, endpoint service, because when you use any of these SSM, S3 interface, blah, blah, you're actually using an endpoint service. And in this case, we are creating ours. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an endpoint service. So we'll call it my NLB or my service endpoint. That's really what I'm going to call it. So my service service endpoint, right? So endpoint is what I'm going to call it. It's a network because that's the thing. So one of the problems is that you can't really use an ALB with it. That's the only limitation. But in as much as you can front an ALB, maybe like NLB front, put an LLB in front, put an ALB behind. The most important thing, an endpoint service just simply needs an NLB. If you give it an NLB, it's happy, or a gateway load balancer, right? So in this case, it knows there is already an NLB there. The service regions is fine. We'll just do US West 2. I think we're in US West 2. Yeah, so that's where I am right now. West um, West 2. Okay, I think, okay, yeah. I think maybe this is if you actually want to support other regions. For now, we're fine. So here, acceptance required, no. Maybe I don't need acceptance is the fact that when you create a service and somebody is trying to connect to that service, you can't actually request that you accept the connection. In this case, for the demo, we're not going to allow enable it. So associate with a private DNS means you can also give it your friendly name to read, to use, whatever. In this case, we don't care. Let's just use the name that is given to us, right? So supported IP address, we'll just do IP v4. And then we'll just do create. Okay. So we're creating a service. That's really what we're doing at this point. We're creating, remember, not endpoint. We're creating a service. That's what we're doing here. We're creating a service. Good. So we're creating a service. Let's see if the service is created. So we'll go here. We'll do, so this is my endpoint service, right? So endpoint service, right? Now remember, in this class, we're doing two VPCs in the same account. But trust me, this same step that I'm doing can work with multiple accounts. You can do this same thing, just put the VPCs in two different accounts. You don't need the VPCs to be in the same account. You can put them in different accounts. That's the whole goal. The whole goal is that you can have my service VPC and a client that is in his own account. I can expose my service to the client, right? Which is exactly what we do. So we've built a small service. Now, the thing is, a service is not useful until it's used, right? Um, so in this case, the endpoint service is being used to privately expose a service to a different VPC without using the natural way of connecting to VPCs. Because usually when a VPC needs to connect to another VPC, there are few options, right? One of it is um, using peering, like you pair the two VPCs, but that's too much. Like maybe in this case, you just want to expose just one service, like just it's very simple. Like in our case, we just want to expose that machine. Why do we need to pair an entire VPC for that to happen? That's one. You can also use transit gateway, but that's like throwing a whole transit gateway on top. Just be you just want to expose a service, right? So that's what we're doing. So in this case, we're creating a service VPC. We'll use endpoint service to expose it, and then anyone that has access to that endpoint, right? In as much as we accept them, we grant them permission to use it, they're going to see the service. Just the way you use many of the interface endpoints. So this, once you understand this, whenever you deal with interface endpoints in AWS, it becomes clear, like how it's built, because it's just another service that is in one VPC somewhere that is exposed to you. And because you have the endpoints, you can use it, right? So we're more or less like building ours in this case. So we've created an endpoint. The question is, how do we use it? We now need to use an endpoint. So think about who is using it now. Is now the client VPC. So let me go back to the diagram. Let me go back to the diagram here. So we created a service. We created a VPC, service VPC, created a small service that we wanted to expose. We put it behind an NLB. That NLB right now is good. We can test it. Now we've exposed it using VPC endpoint service, right? VPC endpoint service. We created a service for it. In this case, we are saying acceptance. We don't need to accept it. It's fine, but you can actually add some security to make sure that whoever is connecting is somebody you're accepting, right? And then now the client now is you who wants to use it. The client who wants to use it needs a way to more or less like use interface endpoint to connect to that service. But the point I'm really trying to stress out here is that here the VPCs are in my account, but in the real world, the VPCs can be in anywhere. It can be one account to another account, right? It could be your account connecting to my account. Okay. So let's go to the client side and then make sure that from the client VPC, who is private, in this case, the client VPC really does not need to go to the internet. In the other one, we needed internet gateway. For the client VPC, we don't really need the internet because this is not about going to the internet. It's about privately connecting to a different AWS service. Okay. So what we are going to do now is go back to our screen. So what we're going to do is go back, and then we're going to create an endpoint. So before we do that, let me go back and note the name because you need a name. You need the name of the service to connect to, right? So we click on this, and what you see is that there is like a, let's see, it's connect, which VPC is this? Let me see which of the VPC is this. Okay, yes, this is where we exposed it as a service. let me see, where were we coming from just now? So we need, yes, so we need the name of the endpoint itself. So what we're going to do is that let's go and create an endpoint, now. So an interface endpoint, not a service, right? So that's always the confusion. There is really endpoint, there is really service. We've exposed a service. Now we need to use an endpoint to connect to that service. So we'll go here. Remember, you see this, you see the endpoint type is EC2 instance connect endpoint. It's different from more or less like creating. So I'm going to call it service. I'm just going to call it service just to differentiate it. So this is going to be interface endpoint, right? So I'm going to call it, or maybe I'll even call it client, because this is going to be created in the client VPC, right? So, and the VPC is right now here, but it can actually be somewhere else. So the difference is that what you can now see is that you see many options. Many of you use AWS service, but you can also use endpoint services that use NLBs and gateway load balancer, which is the category we're trying to test. So I'm going to go here, and then you have to find the right service name, right? So I'm going to verify the service. The service is not available. So maybe I didn't copy that name properly. Let me see, endpoint service. Let me see. Yes, I think I didn't copy the right name. So this is the name here. The service name is here. Okay, so I didn't copy the name. Well, I have to go back. Where was I? I was here. I have to put the right name. So this is the name. Verify the service. Yeah, the service is enabled. So it actually verified it and told me there is a service like that, right? I'm not enabling cross-region endpoints. So now the thing is that where am I creating this? So the thing is that the way this works is that in my own client VPC now, an interface will be created that connects me to that other VPC, right? But now it's kind of confusing because you're seeing both. You're seeing service and client. But in the real world, the service is in a different account, VPC, right? So you won't even see it appear here. But right now, let's just manage the way it's looking. But ideally, this is supposed to be client account, right? That is not the service VPC. So I'm going to use client. Enable private DNS. Okay, yes, this is also if you wanted to more or less like use like a fancy name for you to do that, but we're not using that, right? So now in this case, we're also saying how many of the subnets. We'll just use all the three subnets. So we'll use private, clients. These are all clients, right? So we'll use any of them. It's fine. Security group. We need a security group for this. I don't know if I can actually create one, right? So we'll just create a security group. So let's go to SG and create a security group. Let's not use the default security so that we can actually troubleshoot if something doesn't work well. So we're going to go to EC2 instance here, and then create a security group. Okay, so we're going to create one, and then we are going to say interface endpoints. Sometimes it's good to name things because sometimes you now have allow interface endpoint, right? So and point. So which VPC are we creating this for? It's still the client. Always take note of these things because that's why ClickOps is kind of, once you know ClickOps, you have to know how to translate these things to code because in the process of clicking, you can click and that's where the troubleshooting would become very long, right? So we can do inbound rules. This is where we set the inbound rules. We'll do who is going to use it in this case? Basically, we know that one of the things you need to keep track of is HTTPS has to be enabled. That's like a must. Basically, this is like the interface itself is really your door out, right? So you have to enable 443. And in this case, I think we can use the CIDR of the VPC. So I'm not sure which CIDR is this, but I think it's 10.20. So it's 10.20. It's 10.20.0/16. That's the CIDR, right? So we'll say allow 443, right? So, and then we also need to allow HTTP, right? Because, when you want to test the service, right, it's going to call like the HTTP endpoint kind of. So let's also allow the service here, right? So we're just going to do this. So we'll say allow HTTP, right? HTTP. Trust me, these things, just know that at the end of the day, once you start, putting these things in IAC, it makes sense. But I always encourage you go to the console, understand how it works, Because in IAC, if I'm looking at these things, it kind of makes sense because I know what exactly you're doing. So in this case, we've created an interface endpoint SG. That's what we want to use for the interface endpoint. So we'll go back to the interface endpoint that we were before. We're looking for an SG. So we're going to refresh. Hopefully there's one, right? So we'll use it. And then we'll just leave the name as is. We'll create the endpoint. So we will create the endpoint. Let's see, endpoints is being created. I'm just going to remove this. So here, I'll assume that I'm in the client side of things, okay? So that every filter can give me everything related to the client, right? So now, the good thing about it is that we have an interface endpoint, right? This one we have. And for you, someone was asking me the question the other time, why were we not able to use SSN? We didn't need the internet. That's exactly the reason, because we had a private subnet, but it did not have internet access. That's one. It also did not have an interface endpoint that allows you to talk to an AWS service, right? So that's why it didn't work. Two ways it didn't work. But in this case, it means that we don't even need the internet, right? Number one. But secondly, we can also reach that service that is in the service VPC because we have an interface endpoint for it. Because now it's like you're dropping an ENI in your own VPC that gives you connection straight to the service, right? And we're going to test this easily. Ideally, you can create an EC2 instance. So on my website that I'm creating, these kind of things are things you just follow as a lab, right? You basically just go through it as a lab, all IAC, like basically because there's no way I'm going to be showing these kind of things in that kind of place. But it's all IAC, like step by step, what you need to do and how you can reproduce the same result, right? Just looking at the different segments. It will be more of just writing Terraform to provision the infrastructure. So that, and again, it's easier to also decommission when you're done, because I don't want to start telling you click here to delete. No, with Terraform, make up, you can always do Terraform apply and Terraform destroy when you're done. Okay, so the interface endpoint is still creating, so let's give it some time. It's available, right? The good thing about it is that we did put it in all the subnets, right? So all the private client subnets. Remember, it's all client in this case, right? So how do we test? There are many ways you can test. It means here, if you have like your EC2 machine in any of these subnets, you should be able to test. That's the whole goal. You should be able to basically test that service. Also, if you have more or less like your what do you call it? If you have your anything that is in that subnet should be able to test. That's what we want to prove now. But again, I don't need to launch an EC2 instance to do that. I can do Cloud Shell in the client VPC. So I'll go Cloud Shell. Remember, I had a Cloud Shell before, but that's not the one I'm going to use now because I'm creating a fresh one. In this case, I'm creating one inside of the client's VPC. So that's what I'm doing now. So I'm going to go here and create a new environment. We had one, service VPC. Good. I'm happy I named it. So I'm going to create a new one again. I'm already trying to reach the max, but it's fine. So I'm just going to say client VPC and then push it inside of the client VPC. So client VPC here, subnets, I can use any of the private subnets, right? Because take note, the interface endpoint is there. Like I basically can reach it from any of those subnets, right? So I'm going to do this. Security group, in this case, I really don't, yeah, it doesn't matter. I think I can use any of these ones. It doesn't really matter. It allows me to go out. That's the most important thing here. So I'm going to use the security group. In Cloud Shell, I think, it doesn't really matter. The most important thing is that I can't go out, right? So I basically can go out. So we're creating it. The question is, how do we test? How are we going to test this out? Does anyone know? We're going to test. Now we don't need to be calling the load. We don't know the NLV. We don't know the NLV. We don't know the EC2 machine that is on the other side. But we know the interface endpoint because that is what more or less like created the connection that we needed to get to the service endpoint, right? So that's really the URL we will need. So don't go and be getting the NLB URL. You don't need that. Don't go and be getting the EC2 machine IP. You don't need that. What you need going forward is now the interface endpoint DNS is what you need. So we're going to click this and you can see there's no private DNS because you can't have a private DNS. You can make this URL, the DNS fancy. But in this case, we're just going to copy whatever is given to us as a default. You can also target like more or less like zone specific ones. Like you can see this one is US West. There is the one that says US West 2C, US West 2B, 2A. In this case, I'm just going to copy the main one, right? The main one. So let's hope Cloud Shell is ready. So let's obviously, I can't do something like this. Like I can't do ping Google .com. You know, this is not going to work because this machine does not have access to the internet. Okay, so let's try. Let's do curl and do -i http and do this. Polar, we're there. So we've connected. So this is really what I really wanted to show. So this machine is not connected to the internet. That's number one. It also can be anywhere. This machine can be anywhere. It can be in any account. It just needs to be in a client VPC. But now you can see that from here, I've just been able to connect to a different VPC entirely. There was no need for me to create any VPC pairing. There was no need for me to create any transit gateway. There was no need for that. All I needed to do was to set up the services that I needed to do, right? And then it brought us here. But you can see this same result is what you're seeing here is the same result you will see on the service end. When you ping directly to the machine, you get 200. When you ping directly to the NLB, you get 200. And then from a different VPC entirely that has access to that VPC endpoint service, the endpoint service, you will get 200. So the point is that, you know, the VPC didn't need, there was no need. You just needed to give him the service. Remember, there is security. You can build security. You can have allowed principals. You can have things like making sure that you're accepting only VPCs. Again, you can control many of these things with what do you call it? You can use, for example, even a security group to control many of these things if you wanted, right? Because, for example, let's see if we can actually do that. So we know as much as you can go up here, right? But let's go back to the network load balancer. So we'll go load balancers. We'll go to the network load balancer. In this case, we'll go to security tab. And then we'll go to the load balance, the security group that the network load balancer is using, right? So let's try something. What if we yank the VPC, the VPC cider of the client, right? So in this case, if you remember, the client VPC is where this is there's, you know, when you have so many VPCs, sometimes this is the client VPC, VPC's client. Let's leave. So the cider is 10.20. So what do you think? So what happens if we go and we just go to that security group? So is it 10.20, right? Just trying to be sure so that I don't delete the wrong one. Security group, we were here. So it's 10.20, right? And if we edit it, we actually said it here that allow traffic from the client, right? In this case, we're allowing all traffic to the client. What if we delete this, right? What do you think is going to happen? Maybe save the rule and then try it again. So we'll do this. Yeah. So you can actually disconnect the client. It's not like magic. You can't say, so there are many ways you can use. So the client is disconnected right now. I've locked the client away. So first, it has to be ciders that you've agreed. So if you have like certain clients, you know they're cider, right? They would have a VPC. They would have a range that they want to connect with you from. Sometimes they'll say they need to whitelist. What do you think whitelist is? Like we all know whitelist like an IP address. So in this case, you can see that we've more or less like we've disconnected the client from our VPC. So there are many multiple layers. Security group wise, you can say I'm only expecting connection from this, what do you call it? From this service. Like I'm only expecting connection from this client, right? But you can go multiple layers, right? Because if you actually go to that service, not the interface endpoint, the endpoint service itself, if you click on that endpoint service, you can actually do things like allow principals, for example. So there are multiple ways you can do it. You can allow a principal, but even in the NLB, you can also control that using like a security group rule, right? That does the trick for you. But you can see now the connection is not working. Even if I restart again, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. But maybe we should, just to be sure that it's our change that is bringing it, right? So what do we need to do? Maybe we want to allow really that port, right? We actually are expecting traffic on HTTP. It's really 80. And then we want to bring back the 10.20 .0 /16. So we can say allow traffic from clients, right? So we'll do this traffic. So traffic from clients. And then we'll say the rules. And then go back to CloudShare and see, we'll do this. And then we'll try again, right? Yeah, it's working, right? So multiple layers in which you can connect with. So why can't we ping Google? I said that this is all private connectivity, right? The only reason we had to install an interface, a VPC, the only reason we had to install a what do you call it? A NAT gateway on the other side was because we needed to go to the internet to download resource. But in this case, for the client, we don't. We don't need this machine where we're testing from doesn't need to go to the internet. It basically needs to talk to another service privately, right? And that private service has already been connected to using interface endpoints. So for that reason, you don't need internet access. This is all private. You don't need to go out. So whenever you see yourself going to this place, for example, endpoints, and you go to endpoints and you're creating an endpoint, and you're choosing an AWS service, that is the technology behind it. It is called PrivateLink, right? Which is what we have established right now. So whenever you're creating a service, just know it's a service that has already been exposed. So in this case, we have created our own private link. We pretty much exposed the service, and then we were using from a client to connect to that service. Okay? So while we're on this call, it would be nice for me to do cleanup, right? I'm going to do from Terraform, I'm going to do Terraform as the last thing to bring down the VPCs, right? But also I'm going to go back to the accounts and clean up things, right? So we'll start from the client end. So the client end is really on the side where we're creating the VPC endpoints. So endpoint will, because that's the last thing we created. So we'll start, closing that. So first of all, I need to actually remove all these Cloud Shell environment. I don't really need them. So I'm just going to delete this shell. I mean, class, we validated our solution, right? But before you go, I'm going to show you what the diagram looks like again so that we can confirm the things we've done. Or maybe before I even delete, let me show you that diagram once more so that you see what we did. So if you scroll down, if I take this a bit down, you see that on-premise, I said you could use direct connect or maybe like a VPN, to connect to AWS VPC. But from when you're now inside of AWS, maybe you did all that during your migration phase. But now when you're in AWS, sometimes you need a VPC, service VPC, supplying, servicing a service, a client VPC. That client VPC can be yours. It can also be a different VPC entirely. And think about it, if it's yours, it means maybe there is a different account that has a service that they're exposing, and maybe you just have to use your own service VPC or your own client VPC, still from the same organization to connect to it, right? And we said that is really powered by PrivateLink, right? And for that, the simple way to get it done is NLB. You create an endpoint service, VPC endpoint service. From there, you create on the client side. So on the service side, two things: something that is behind an NLB or a gateway load balancer, exposed using an endpoint service, and then on the client side, you need an interface endpoint, and then a client that is trying to make connection. Okay, cool. So let me just go back to the screen where I'm tearing down stuff so that you can see how I'm doing it. So confirm. So I'm just going to do delete. I'm just going to do delete here. I've deleted this shell. I'm also going to delete this one. I'm just going to delete all this Cloud Shell environment that I have here. So this is deletion time, right? But again, I mean, when we are deleting, it also makes you begin to see the things we created. So let's now go back to the client side where we can actually get, first of all, remove the endpoint, right? From the interface endpoint. So we'll delete it. So we'll delete this one. This is the interface endpoint. Once the interface endpoint is deleted, on the client side, we now know we don't have any other thing, right? The only thing on the client side is just to get rid of the VPC, right? But let's delete the interface first because we need that for us to be able to get rid of the VPC. Okay, so we'll do that. While this is ongoing, let's go to the other side. So the endpoint service side. Okay, we can't even delete the endpoint service because there is still an interface endpoint connected to it. So let's wait. Let's wait for this to be deleted. Sometimes it takes time. And once this is deleted, we'll go and delete that one, and then we can start cleaning up things. And then the other part is really easy, right? The Terraform part is just what provisions the, what do you call it, the IAC. That one is easy for us to just tear down. Okay. Cool. Let's see. Yeah, so sometimes when you create an EC2 machine, you're having issues. It can be many things, right? One of it is always check. Just always check. There's some times where internet connectivity in a machine is not required, but just make sure if anything you're doing requires internet connectivity, then that machine has to have a way to go to the internet. If it's on the public subnet, just use the internet gateway. If it's on the private subnet, you have to find a way for it to go through the public subnet to go to the internet, right? But again, other than that, it could not be other things like network ACL, security group. In our own case, I knew it wasn't the security group, it wasn't the network ACL because we used IAC, so we couldn't have gone wrong. We used IAC to provision the VPC. So the only thing that could be wrong is that when we provision the VPC from the start, we were only using private. Just we said we didn't want public subnet, and for that reason, there was no NAT gateway, there was no internet gateway given to us, right? Once we fixed that, the EC2 machine was able to download the stuff, set itself up, and then it was able to start returning status code 200, which we needed to test the machine, and we also needed for the NLB to test, right? And once that was done, it was easy for us to set up the other things. Okay, so sometimes you need to. This is how you grow. You basically need to begin to understand, like, where do I look when something is wrong? Where should I be looking at? Like, where is that next point I should be looking at to find out what could be wrong? Okay, and sometimes it's always dependent on the problem, right? Some problems the problems are always different. So this is gone. So the endpoint is gone. It means that if the endpoint is gone, we can actually delete the endpoint service, right? Because remember, the endpoint service is using the NLB, and for that reason, there's no way we'll delete the NLB without deleting the endpoint service. So let's delete the endpoint service. So we will do delete endpoint service, and we'll do delete. And then once this is done, we will just go. So if you think about it, we created just a few things manually, right? So the endpoint service is gone. What else did we create? We created a number of security groups, but we can clean those ones last. So from now, we can go to the NLB, right? So we'll clean the NLB because we know that the NLB uses a target group, but we can't clean that until we clean the NLB. So we'll go to EC2, go to load balancers, and then clean the network load balancer, right? So we'll go here, load balancers. We will clean, where's the load balancer? Am I in a different region or what? Okay, I think this is my screen is so we're deleting the service NLB, right? So delete so we can confirm. So we'll do this. Now that is getting deleted, let's see, it's actually gone. So what it means is that because the network load balancer is gone, we can now delete the target groups, right? So we had one target group, right? So we can actually delete it. So we will delete the target group. We'll just delete it. It's gone. What is the next thing? We need to delete the EC2 machine that was feeding the target group. So we'll go to EC2 instances. We'll look at the EC2 instance we created, the one that worked after all the ones that didn't work, right? So we'll do this. We'll delete, terminate, and then we'll terminate it, right? Let me refresh. All right, so it's shutting down. So at this point, it's more or less like all these things they're not using VPCs again. So I think I created a couple of SGs. So I'm just going to go and remove those, right? So security groups. So I'm just going to go to security groups, look at the ones that I created, and then delete them, right? So let me see. I have a couple of them here, but let me check by name. I know I did name mine. So instance connect SG, interface endpoint SG. I did create this one. I think I didn't create these on this call, but I created these two, right? I also created the NLB. These are all the issues you have to deal with if you didn't use IAC. So it's understandable, okay? So I'm just going to get rid of these three, okay? So I'm just going to do delete here and then do delete. Cool, it's gone. So what do you think is left? For the other things, NAT gateways, those ones were all provisioned from IAC, so I'm going to get rid of them from there, right? And I think that's pretty much what we created as part of this lab, like officially from this lab. Those were the things we created, right? So let me refresh this. Yeah, those it's gone. Some of these things are just security groups that are in my account. So now with that out of the way, what do you think we need to do? So this is gone. So let's go back to code. So let's go back to where it all started from. So we'll go to like the client VPC in this case. So we can go to client here and just do Terraform destroy. Okay. So this is going to tear down the VPC, tear down the, in the case of clients, yeah, it's just going to tear down the basic VPC, right? Because it doesn't really have internet gateway. I mean, we can do them in parallel. So we're terminating here, destroying here. We can also go to the other. So you can see it tells me 13 resource is going to be destroyed, which saves us a lot of stress. Like instead of what I've been doing where I'm doing it manually, I can basically just do yes, right? So it's going to start tearing it down. Everything is going to go. And then yeah, I can also do the same. I can just do Terraform destroy. right? So this is the flexibility. This is the benefit you start getting once you start transitioning from not just being able to own things in the console, but being able to basically, because you understand them in the console, you make them reproducible using an IAC tool. You know, and then all the truth is that everything that I did in the UI, right? It can be like this, right? Such that you launch the IAC and the same solution that you saw just now, me doing ClickUps, you get it, right? You get it. I can stage all the machines, stage all the security groups, and then you just have two things that you need to maybe connect to the client's EC2 machine and confirm that you can connect to the service EC2 machine. This is like this is not this, if you understand this, there are a lot of things in AWS, especially around endpoint, VPC endpoints that becomes natural to you as time goes on. Okay, so here we're just going to do yes, cool. If you go back to your account, I think everything should be fine. If you check my VPC, for example, if I refresh, there is only the service VPC, which is destroying. If you go to route tables, the route tables you see are basically the ones from, I think this private route table, I created it at some point ago, but the subnet will just be the ones that comes with the public subnet, basically. You would see that this service public subnet, I'm sure it's still deleting, so it hasn't finished. So let's give it some time. Let me see what's deleting there. So yeah, it's going through stuff. NAT gateway is going to delete it, right? And it's always a good way for you to use IAC, because then you will not forget that, oh, something is running, I forgot, because IAC can just basically clean up stuff for you, right? So this is the internet gateway that comes with the account. I don't care about this one. This one is going to be terminated after a while. I think it's still getting rid of the NAT gateways. So let me look for it. So it's NAT gateways here. So it's showing deleted. So that means after some time, everything should be good. So the destruction complete. So if I refresh, it's deleted. I don't really need to do anything about them. If I go to the internet gateway, I refresh, there's no internet gateway again. The service internet gateway has gone. The route table would only be the things that were from the AWS account, which is this one's. I think this one I played with it at some point. For subnet, there only be subnet from the things I've done in the past. But everything that I've done from this lab, it's all gone. Cool. I think that is it. That is it. It was a long session, but I think I hope you found it useful. It's a pattern that you're going to see. It's there, whether it's within the organization or it's you trying to more or less like expose the service to a different AWS account completely. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to share. Let me just